I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and today we're on the New South Wales North Coast to drive this, the updated 2019 Mazda MX-5 range. Now, this update to the ND generation MX-5 focuses mainly on the 2-litre petrol engine, and you'll remember from our previous ND content that this vehicle is available with 2 petrol 4-cylinders, a really sweet 1.5 litre that the ND was actually designed around initially, and a higher performance 2-litre engine that America and Australia were very keen to add as a stronger option for this car. Well, while there have been a few little updates to the 1.5 litre engine, this update has really been about improving the drivability and the enjoyment of the 2-litre engine, specifically getting the rev limiter up to close to the 1.5 litres at 7,500 RPM, improving the sound of the thing and giving it an even more punchy mid-range, and all those things have been done for 2019. There's also a bit more safety kit on the MX-5, including AEB for the first time and a reversing camera across the range. I'm going to be giving you a reminder of what the Mazda is like inside the cabin and in its little boot, but then we're going to be taking this 2-litre engined MX-5 out onto the road to see the changes for 2019 and whether they make this thing an even better sports car to drive. This update to the MX-5 has been all about that 2-litre engine. There haven't been any major changes to the cabin, but I will run you through what life is like here driving and passengering in the Mazda MX-5. Essentially, this cabin is everything you need as a driver and little that you don't, but that said, over the years since the ND was introduced, a higher level of creature comforts have become standard across the range. That includes Mazda's 7-inch MZD Connect touchscreen, which continues to feature here. It's nice and close to you in the MX-5, so you actually can touch it very easily, and it's nice and responsive. However, you also get Mazda's really good Commander rotary dial system down here with shortcuts for navigation and media options. And while you're on the move, this is the safest way to connect it. Still no Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, however, that wasn't ready in time for this 2019 model year MX-5. It will be coming before the end of the year, but even if you buy this MX-5 brand new now, you'll still have to pay more later on to get Apple CarPlay and the high-speed USB port required to power smartphone mirroring. That's something to keep in mind price-wise. Now, this particular car we're sitting in is an RF 2-litre, so above this there is a GT grade, which is a little bit more luxurious. In the base grade, you just get black cloth seats, though the RF gets this really cool kind of fuchsia stitching that you can also see here up on the dashboard. That is a really nice touch. In the GT grades, there's a choice of black leather or tan leather, and then on the RF GT, a further choice of chroma brown Napa leather. The steering wheel you get is really lovely. Nice thin rim, creamy leather, also that really cool contrast stitching on the RF model, and the dials are classic, really nice, analog. They look great, but there is no digital speedo in the MX-5 because you can't get it with the heads-up display like you can with most other Mazdas. Climate control, that's now standard across the range. That's a nice thing. And of course, on the RF, you also have controls to operate the electric roof. Now, practicality, that's not a hugely strong point for the MX-5, as you'd imagine. You do get a couple of cup holders that you can change between positions down here or behind you. There is what essentially passes for a glove box between the seats and a tiny little tray here and a further little tray between the seats, really just for coins. 2 USB ports ahead of the driver. They are relatively slow to charge devices until the Apple CarPlay and Android Auto update comes, which will give one of them the high-powered charge. And that's about it for the cabin of the MX-5. Neither the MX-5 soft top nor this retractable fastpack version are cars that are meant to be about practicality, but it is nice to know that you and someone special could take this away as a weekender, and that's exactly what you can do, because there's about 130 litres of space in the boot, 127 actually on this RF, not that you would notice the difference. That's enough space for one hard medium cabin bag or a couple of soft canvas or leather bags. Not a huge space by any stretch of the imagination, but certainly adequate for a weekender. Of course, the big question is, do these changes to the 2-litre engine make it a better car to drive? And put simply, yes, they do. The issue with the ND MX-5 was always that the 1.5 litre engine was really sweet to drive, but it was pretty slow. And the 2-litre was fast and torquey, but quite coarse and grainy and didn't rev very high. So it felt like the wrong kind of engine for, a real pure sports car like the Mazda MX-5. Thankfully, most of the changes to the 2-litre have integrated a lot of the character of the 1.5-litre into the bigger engine, so everybody's happy. The 2-litre now produces 135 kilowatts of power, up from 118 kilowatts, and 205 newton meters of torque, which is up just 5 newton meters to 200 newton meters, but torque was never the problem. High-end power was, and the rev limiter now goes up from 6,800 RPM to 7,500 RPM, and the 2-litre seems to rev for a lot longer. You see the tach sweeping all the way around, right up to the top right corner to 7,500 revs, to the fuel cutout, shift up, and the whole experience is a lot nicer. It reduces unnecessary shifting, it makes the car faster, and you just have that little bit of extra power and top-end punch to add to what was already a really torquey engine. You can certainly still drive the MX-5 2-litre around on low-end torque, which makes this a really easy car to drive in town and at low speed, but when you're out having a proper fang in the 2-litre, it's now just got that nice extra bit at the top end. The sound, they've changed a lot of the components in the exhaust. It does sound better, less coarse and grainy and yuck, but it still doesn't sound as sweet as the 1.5 litre. Up here today near Byron Bay, I've spent about equal time in the 1.5 and the 2 litre. They've come closer together in sweetness, but that 1.5 litre base model MX-5 is still the one I'd pick. That's because I don't really care about going outright fast in a car like this, which actually isn't a fast car, whichever way you look at it. I prefer that really light, darty, particularly sweet front end on the 1.5 and having to work for the pace and really row through the gears and keep it at the top end. By contrast, the 2 litre is a lot torqueier, so you don't have to shift as much. You can short shift and get into higher gears, and it's easier to drive fast because of that, and 95% of people in Australia go for the 2 litre. So obviously my preferences are in the extreme minority, and I accept that. All of the normal advantages of the MX-5 stick around. There's been no changes to the steering or the suspension for 2019. The steering is still really, really darty. The front end on this thing is so sweet, and because you've got this super short wheelbase plus rear wheel drive and a decent shove of torque, especially in the 2 litre, you can get that back end to move around a lot. And I don't mean purely in a silly sense, I mean that you can correct your line really nicely while cornering just by feeding in extra throttle on corner exit. You can tighten up your line, get back in a straight line and get on the power nice and quickly. It works really well. The ride quality in the MX-5 continues to be surprisingly good because this is a softly sprung car. You can use the body roll to your advantage in terms of tipping it right into a corner and using the chassis rather than leaning on the Bridgestone Potenza tyres too much. However, you will find if you're coming to an MX-5 for the first time that the roll can be almost comical when you're getting used to it, but get used to it, you certainly do, and the soft ride quality in town is definitely worth it. One thing that has changed for the MX-5 is that the safety tech is a lot better. The entire range now gets city speed autonomous emergency braking going forward, plus a reversing camera and traffic sign recognition. The GT models also get AEB in reverse, which is particularly useful, especially if you've got an animal or an object behind you that you just don't pick up in the reversing camera, plus lane departure warning, blind spot monitoring, and rear cross traffic alert. So those are my impressions of the changes to the Mazda MX-5 for 2019. This little two-door is one of my absolute favourite cars. It sets out to be a brilliant second car, a bit of fun on a beautiful sunny day with the roof down, and it executes that concept brilliantly. The updated 2 litre that essentially everyone buys is now more like my preferred engine, the 1.5, so that's good. And everything else that was already nearly perfect, like the handling balance and ride quality, goes unchanged. Just the continuing lack of CarPlay for now holds the MX-5 back, though that will be fixed soon. I still give this convertible a glowing recommendation.